Hello, this is Brad Wild, and today we are in southwest Washington at an airport called Kilo Charlie Lima Sierra. It's just a little bit northwest of one of my last videos where I was doing some pattern work and touch and goes in Astoria. And we're going to do an RNAV approach into an airport just to the south, which is Kilo Lima Sierra. And I pulled up the chart here for the RNAV approach. And we'll be coming here from the north, and our initial approach fix is going to be wind low. And you'll notice down here in our minimums that we have three different kinds of approaches: LNAV, LNAV with VNAV, and LPV. LPV being the most accurate and having the lowest minimums. We're going to fly this first approach in the Laminar default 172 with the Garmin 1000, and it is what they call WAAS equipped, and that's WAAS. So we're going to get high levels of precision. But what the avionics will do in an aircraft, depending on its level of sophistication, will select the approach with the most precision. The better the avionics, the more precise it's going to be, and the higher level, as it were, of approach it will be able to handle. So you're going to see both an LPV approach, and then we're going to shoot it in the Bonanza F33, which just has a Garmin 430. So you can see the difference. And we're going to do the first one in visual conditions and the second one in instrument conditions. So let's get started. Let's program our Garmin 1000. So battery, avionic, beacon on. Pop this out. I've cleared it, and now I just need to put in our arrival airport. And next, let's select a procedure. An approach. I always think of an approach to the runway as opposed to an arrival to the area. An arrival would be like a star. We have one option, and we're going to select wind low for our initial approach fix. And I'm going to go ahead and activate this. And finally, I'm going to put in 4,000 feet as our initial altitude. So everything is set for our Garmin 1000. So now it's just a matter of getting this bird off the ground. So let's make sure our fuel is on, our mixture is rich, crack the throttle, make sure we are clear, and magnetos to start. Check our RPM, oil pressure, everything looks good. Taxi light, nav light, and we are ready to taxi to the end of the runway, and I will save you that journey. So join me in a minute. Here we are at the end of runway 16. So we're going to be headed a little bit to the right after we take off. So we've got mixture rich, a notch of flaps, landing lights on, strobe on, alternator on. So we're ready to roll. Break off. full throttle, airspeed alive. And the nose just kind of comes off the ground. Build up a little speed. Stay over that runway. Don't do anything till you get past the end of it. Alright, retract the flaps. Begin our turn. Engage autopilot. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Nav. Vertical speed. We'll just take a nice, slow, gentle climb for right now. And we're waiting for this needle to come across, indicating we are on our flight plan. You can see here. We're about ready to intercept it, pick it up. And we can probably be a little bit more aggressive in our climb. Again, this is the default 172 with the G1000. See the airport behind us. So join me as we get a little bit closer and cross wind low. So as we approach wind low, we are at 4,000 feet, and this is our initial approach fix. And we begin our turn and the inbound portion of our approach. So we'll just hold this until we get a little bit closer to our IF. So as we approach Yapek, which is our immediate fix, the immediate fix is the end of our initial approach, which we are now currently on. I can see here that our VNAV profile is beginning to show or has started to show a time to top of descent, which is just a couple of minutes, 2 minutes and 50 seconds to be exact. And we will see this wind down to 0, and then we should see our vertical guidance on our PFD. And at that point we will click VNAV, and the autopilot will begin to follow the glide path in our descent. The first part of our descent is the intermediate, and it will be LNAV, VNAV. And then when we reach the final approach fix, you'll see the LPV activate, and we'll get more precise guidance and a little different indication. So you'll see how that works in just a second. So we're right here. We still are on our initial approach. This is the immediate approach, and then finally where we get to ANGI, I guess we'll call it, our final approach fix, we'll begin getting that LPV navigation, vertical navigation, much more precise. So I'm just kind of watching for that vertical indication here. So as we get closer, that number gets closer to 0. And this will drop to 0. And we're 42 seconds out. From that intermediate fix. And you can see the vertical indicator here. We have a V, and I'm going to click VNav. Dial my altitude down first to minimums and then VNav. And we see VPath here. Come back on my speed. So I should have dialed that in a little bit sooner, because it's not going to descend until I get at least below my 4,000 feet. But this little caret here shows that we are using VNav as opposed to LPV. And we'll see that change to a diamond, and we'll get a G up here. Nothing is indicating here as to what's going on. It still says terminal. But we do have GPS, autopilot, VPath, it's green. So we're a little bit below, but I'm just going to let it adjust, and that's what it's doing. So it's delayed our descent a little bit, or decreased the rate of descent. Come back a little bit on our throttle. Our caret is still in the middle, but now as we have reached this, I can't even pronounce that. You notice we are getting the G and the diamond, so we are now on LPV guidance. Our rate of descent has slowed a little bit, so we can catch our glide path. And there's our runway. So we are lined up perfectly. So as we approach our final approach fix, we want to make sure we've got the aircraft slowed down a little bit, configured for landing. But you can see our diamond is almost dead center. And notice down here it reads LPV. V path is still green. So it's nice to know that the Garmin 1000, as it is in the Laminar aircraft, is WAAS. That's WAAS, is WAAS capable, which gives us the full amount of precision we can expect in an RNAV approach, which in this case is LPV, which it's about as good as you can get. See what happens when I drop a notch of flaps here. See if it corrects itself. Yep, very nicely. That second notch of flaps, I don't know. But you can see our VASI lights. Too white, too red. These flaps really slow us down, don't they? But our diamond's still centered, still reading LPV. Autopilot off. My airplane. Probably a little slow here. I apologize for that. Well, the autopilot did a much better job of maintaining that glide path. Not glide slope, it's glide path. And we'll just let it settle. Squeaky brakes. All right, so that was our LPV approach, starting with a VNAV first. And we saw the two different indications on our vertical guidance here. So next, let's just shoot a regular RNAV approach in the Bonanza. As promised, our next flight is in the Bonanza F33 from Carenado. And it's going to be instrument conditions down to minimums. Now, this aircraft will only allow LNAV, VNAV. So we have to note that the minimums are quite different than the LPV, which we just flew. So we're going to have to be a little bit more judicious in our minimums. So let's get this thing programmed. All right, battery on, beacon on, radio's on. This is the wonderful Garmin 430. And let's start with putting in our arrival airport. I wish there was a keyboard equivalent for this, or keyboard keys for this. And then our procedure, RNAV 12, and let's look for wind low for our initial approach fix, and we'll activate that, and our flight plan is populated, so we're good. And I want to make sure I've got 4,000 feet dialed into my autopilot here, which is our target altitude. And now let's get the engine started. Looking for the fuel gauge, or the fuel valve, and mixture rich, throttle full, fuel flow, kind of prime the pump as it were, crack our throttle, check the propeller area, magnetos to start. Taxi light, nav light, and we'll taxi out to the runway, and I'll have you join me when we are ready for takeoff. We are at the end of runway 16, ready for departure. All my lights are on. I've got a notch of flaps, and we're ready to roll. Release that parking brake. Fight that P factor here. And we rotate about 70. Fly that runway heading, gear up, and I want to make sure my Garmin is on GPS or things will not work. And nav AP, and arm my altitude. And we can reduce our RPM by pulling back on our prop. And let's see how we're doing here. And we're just about ready to pick up that line between the airport and Winlow. So we are approaching our our immediate fix, thus ending our initial approach and beginning that intermediate. Above the clouds here. Just a refresher, we are about here, about ready to pick up our immediate fix and begin our approach into runway 12. I want to make a note of these altitudes, 3,000 at Kosra and 2,700 at Yuxale. And I keep those in mind because I'm going to have to navigate to those myself. I will not get vertical navigation help in this particular aircraft, even though the Garmin is WAAS capable. So come back on my throttle, and I'll want to click approach as I begin my turn. And it should be coming up shortly, and I'll begin a descent. I'll start with about 500 feet per minute. Again, I'm going to descend manually until I pick up my LPV, and there'll be two indicators on my HSI, two yellow diamonds. Keep an eye on my speed, and I will click approach and begin my descent. So I've got a minute and 20 seconds to reach 3,300 feet. Need to be a little bit more aggressive. And I'm watching for any indication here that I'm getting my LPV, but nothing is showing up down here on my Garmin. So I'm not quite at 33 yet. And on to Yuxale. And that altitude is 2,700 feet. And hopefully by then I'll pick up my LPV and get my vertical guidance. Trying to slow down without putting my gear down yet. So 48 seconds to 2,700 feet. We're not doing too badly here. Again, I'm watching my HSI. Probably don't need that strobe right now. Okay, 2700, and you can see that I've got vertical guidance indicators here. Slow down my rate of descent until we pick up that glide path. Notice LPV is appearing on the Garmin. And it looks like I'm getting vertical guidance. I'm not doing anything, but you can see the two yellow diamonds on the HSI, and the vertical speed is now being controlled by the autopilot. So apparently the Garmin 430 is WAAS capable, which means we're going to get the really accurate LPV approach, which is great. Makes X-plane a lot more exciting. Of course, you have to have an LPV approach, but the equipment on the airplane is available to handle it. We do need to slow down. Gear down. Again, I'm not doing anything to control either horizontal or vertical guidance. Keeping an eye on my speed. And our yellow diamonds on our HSI are still centered. And the Garmin is still showing LPV. So now we just need a runway. And we're reaching our minimums of 730 feet. And there's our runway. And the VASI is showing 2 white and 2 red. So the aircraft is doing great. Final notch of flaps. All right, we'll kill the autopilot. Boy, these VASI lights do have you landing a ways down the runway. So that ends our demo. We used the G1000 and the Laminar 172 to get a really nice VNAV to LPV transition, and then the lowly Garmin 430 and the Bonanza here, and got assistance after a point. It just required a little bit of manual descent. So, my recommendation to you is crank up X-plane and shoot an RNAV approach. And about any plane that's got that approach button on your autopilot. So, until then, this is Brad Wild.